Why you can't ask for help, even when you're drowning. There is a particular kind of silence that only certain people carry. It is not the silence of having nothing to say. It is the silence of having everything to say and choosing, again and again, to say none of it. You have felt this silence in rooms full of people who love you. You have felt it in the middle of a conversation where someone asked genuinely, "Are you okay?" And you heard yourself answer, "Yeah, I'm fine," before you had even finished deciding whether it was true. This is not a personality trait. It is not simply that you are private or independent or low maintenance, though you have probably used all of those words to describe yourself, and probably believed them. Underneath those words is something older and less comfortable to look at directly. There is a part of you that has learned, somewhere back in the architecture of your life, that needing other people is a risk you cannot afford to take. Not because you are weak. Because somewhere, at some point, you were. You are drowning quietly right now, in some corner of your life, and you know it. Maybe it is exhaustion that no amount of sleep touches. Maybe it is a weight in your chest that shows up the moment you stop being busy. Maybe it is the sense that you are performing competence for an audience that has stopped noticing whether the performance is costing you anything. And still, when the opportunity arrives to say the true sentence, the one that starts with, "I need," your mouth produces something else instead, something smaller, something safer, something that keeps the door closed. This video is not going to tell you to just ask for help, as if the problem were a lack of vocabulary. You know the words. You have always known the words. The problem was never that you didn't know how to ask. The problem is that somewhere inside you, asking was reclassified as dangerous, and no one has gone back to correct that classification since. We are going to go back. We are going to trace exactly where this began, what it protected you from, why it still feels true even though it is quietly destroying you, and what it would actually take to let someone see you struggling without your nervous system treating it as an emergency. By the end of this, you will understand something that will be uncomfortable and enormously clarifying at once. Your inability to ask for help was never a flaw in your character. It was a solution. It worked. And the tragedy is that it is still running, decades later, solving a problem that no longer exists. The silence where a request should have been. Think about the last time you actually needed something from another person. Not wanted, needed. A ride when your car broke down. Someone to sit with you after the diagnosis. A hand with the boxes you could not physically carry alone. Somewhere in that moment, before the need even became fully conscious, a calculation happened. It happened faster than thought, faster than language, in the part of you that runs on instinct rather than reasoning. And the calculation concluded. Handle it yourself. This is the moment that matters, because it is not really a decision. Decisions can be examined and changed. What you have is closer to a reflex, and reflexes were built for a reason. Somewhere in your history, asking for something and receiving disappointment, absence, ridicule, or silence taught your nervous system that the moment of need is also the moment of danger. Not danger of the drowning itself, danger of reaching out and finding nothing there. The second kind of danger is worse because at least drowning alone is a familiar shape. Reaching and finding nothing rewires what you believe about the world. So the silence is not empty. It is full of a decision that was made a long time ago, by a version of you too young or too overwhelmed to make it consciously, and never revisited since. Every time you say, "I'm fine," when you are not lying in the ordinary sense. You are executing a program that was written to keep you safe in a context that no longer exists, using data that is decades out of date. Here is the sentence worth sitting with. You did not become self-sufficient because you are strong. You became self-sufficient because at some point, someone or something taught you that needing was not survivable in the way you needed it to be. And the question that will not leave you alone, the one underneath every version of "I'm fine," is this. What actually happened the first time you needed someone and they were not there? Why asking feels like a confession of failure. There is a distortion that lives quietly inside people who cannot ask for help, and it sounds something like this. Needing something means I could not handle it myself, and not handling it myself means something is wrong with me. Notice the leap in that sentence. Needing help does not logically require a defect. Every human being who has ever lived has needed other people, at every stage, in every culture, without exception. And yet for you, the need arrives preloaded with shame, as if the need itself were the evidence of a private failure you are trying to keep from becoming public. This distortion did not appear out of nowhere. It was taught, usually by an environment that treated need as inconvenience. Maybe you grew up around a parent who was overwhelmed, and your needs, however small, registered on their face as one more thing they could not handle. You watched that flicker of exhaustion cross their features, and you learned, without anyone saying a word, that your needs were a burden you were adding to someone already at capacity. A child does not conclude, "My parent is overwhelmed." A child concludes, "My needs are the problem." That conclusion, formed at 4 or 7 or 11, does not update itself automatically at 28 or 40. It simply keeps running, translated now into adult language, still convinced that to need is to burden, and to burden is to fail. So when you feel the urge to ask for help today, what actually arrives first is not the request. It is the anticipatory shame of having a need at all. You feel the shame before you even feel the courage to speak, which means the request dies before it is born. You are not choosing silence out of strength. You are choosing it because the alternative in your nervous system's accounting is worse than drowning. Drowning is at least private. Failure witnessed is unbearable. Here is the insight worth carrying with you past this video. Your shame about needing help is not information about your character. It is a scar tissue map of every moment your needs were treated as too much. And scar tissue, unlike the original wound, can be worked with, softened, and eventually made flexible again, if you are willing to touch it directly instead of building your entire identity around never needing to. The child who learned not to need anyone. Somewhere inside almost everyone who struggles to ask for help lives a very specific memory, even if it has been buried under decades of competence and independence. It is usually small, a moment that would look from the outside almost nothing at all. A parent's back turned at the wrong moment. A sibling who got the comfort you were also asking for. A teacher who said, "You'll be fine," in a tone that closed the conversation rather than opened it. These are not dramatic scenes. They rarely make it into the stories we tell about our childhoods. But the nervous system does not grade memories by drama. It grades them by pattern, and pattern is built from repetition, not intensity. If, across enough small moments, the message arriving was some version of "your need is inconvenient, unwelcome, or unseen," a child does the only thing a child can do with an environment they cannot change. They adapt to survive it. And the adaptation, brilliant in its own way, was to stop needing out loud. Not to stop needing because needing is biological and cannot simply be switched off. To stop expressing it. To become the child who is easy, who does not ask for much, who is praised eventually for being so low maintenance, so mature, so independent for their age. That praise is where the trap closes completely, because now the very thing that was originally a wound becomes a source of identity and even pride. You were rewarded for suppressing your needs, which means the suppression itself became something you now protect, rather than something you would ever think to question. You are not just avoiding help because it feels dangerous. You are avoiding it because somewhere you decided that not needing help is who you are. And if you asked, you would have to become someone else, someone less impressive, someone closer to that unseen child. What follows from this is uncomfortable, but necessary. The version of you that learned to survive without asking was a child solving a child's problem with a child's resources. You are not that child anymore. You have resources now that child never had. And yet the strategy has outlived the circumstances that required it, still running, still protecting you from a danger that, in most of your current relationships, simply does not exist anymore. When independence becomes a cage. There is a version of independence that is genuinely healthy. It looks like competence, capability, the ability to handle your own life without needing constant rescue. That version is not what we are talking about here. What we are talking about is independence that functions less like a strength and more like a wall, built so early and so thoroughly that you can no longer tell the difference between choosing to be self-reliant and being unable to be anything else. The tell is simple, even if it is hard to admit. Healthy independence feels like a choice you could reverse. You could ask for help if you wanted to. You simply prefer, in this instance, to handle it yourself. The independence we are describing does not feel like a choice at all. It feels like the only available option. The way breathing feels like the only available option. When someone offers to help you and you feel your whole body tense, when you find yourself refusing assistance you actually want, when you would rather struggle visibly than say 4 words out loud, that is not preference. That is a cage dressed up as a personality trait. The cruelest part of this cage is that it looks from the outside exactly like strength. People admire you for it. They say things like, "I don't know how you do it all," and you smile. Because the alternative is explaining that you do it all, because the idea of not doing it all, of letting someone else carry part of it, feels like exposing a nerve you have spent your whole life protecting. Their admiration becomes another reason to keep the cage intact, because now dismantling it would mean disappointing the very people who love the version of you that never asks for anything. What almost no one tells you is that the cage was built to protect a much younger version of you from a danger that has, in most cases, long since passed. The people around you now are not the people who taught you that needing was unsafe. Some of them, maybe most of them, are actually capable of holding your need without flinching. But the cage does not update itself just because the environment has changed. It requires you to test it, deliberately, one small crack at a time, before it will ever believe that the old danger is gone. The body keeps drowning. Even when the face smiles, here is something your mind has been hiding from you. Or perhaps something your mind knows perfectly well and has simply decided not to mention. Your body has been keeping score this entire time, even while your face has been performing calm. The exhaustion that sleep does not fix. The tension that lives permanently in your shoulders and jaw. The way your chest tightens in ordinary, unthreatening moments, for no reason you can name. This is not separate from your inability to ask for help. It is the direct cost of it. When you suppress a need instead of expressing it, the need does not disappear. It goes somewhere. Physiologically, an unexpressed need behaves very much like an unresolved threat, because to the part of your brain responsible for survival, an unmet need genuinely is a kind of threat. Your nervous system does not know the difference between "I cannot ask for emotional support" and "I am in actual physical danger." It responds to both with the same chemistry, the same vigilance, the same refusal to fully rest. This is why you can sleep 8 hours and wake up as tired as when you lay down. Rest requires the nervous system to believe it is safe to stand down, and yours has been on duty for so long it may not remember how to stand down at all. This is also why the smile costs you something the people around you will never see the invoice for. Every time you say "I'm okay" while your body is screaming otherwise, you are not simply managing someone else's comfort. You are widening the gap between what you show and what you carry, and that gap over years becomes its own kind of exhaustion, separate from whatever originally caused it. You are not just tired from your life. You are tired from the performance of being fine inside your life. The insight to hold on to here is this: your body is not malfunctioning. It is accurately reporting a truth your mouth has refused to say out loud for years. And the drowning you feel is not a metaphor you are exaggerating for effect. It is a precise description of what it feels like to carry weight your arms were never designed to hold completely alone, indefinitely without anyone else's hands ever touching it. Why you trust your own exhaustion more than other people's kindness. There is something strange and specific that happens in the mind of someone who cannot ask for help, and it deserves to be named plainly. You will trust your own suffering, fully and immediately, without a second thought. You will believe without hesitation that you can survive another sleepless week, another overloaded month, another season of carrying everything yourself. But offer you the smallest piece of genuine kindness, a friend who says, "Let me help with that." A partner who notices you are struggling and asks what they can take off your plate, and something in you resists. You find reasons the offer will not really work. You minimize your own situation until the offer no longer seems necessary. You trust your exhaustion more than you trust their care. This is not because you dislike kindness, or because you are ungrateful. It is because kindness, to a nervous system that learned need was dangerous, is unpredictable in a way that your own suffering is not. Suffering is familiar. You know exactly how it behaves, how much of it you can absorb, what its edges feel like. Someone else's care is an unknown variable. It might be withdrawn. It might come with conditions you cannot see yet. It might worst of all be genuine, which would mean you have to actually let it in, actually depend on it, actually risk the version of loss that happens when you allow yourself to need someone and then lose access to them. So you default to what is knowable. You would rather manage a predictable amount of pain alone than gamble on an unpredictable amount of relief from someone else. This is not weakness. It is a strategy that made perfect sense the first time your trust in someone's care was betrayed, disappointed, or simply proven unreliable. The tragedy is that the strategy generalizes. It does not stay contained to the one relationship or the one moment that taught it to you. It spreads until it governs every offer of help you will ever receive, from people who have never once given you a reason to distrust them. And one thing follows from this, whether you are ready for it or not. If you have never actually tested whether the people currently in your life can hold your need without disappointing you, then your distrust is not evidence about them. It is evidence about someone else from a long time ago that you have never stopped auditioning everyone new for the role of proving. The hidden fear behind "I'm fine," 3 words, said thousands of times over the course of a life, and almost never examined for what they are actually protecting you from. "I'm fine" is rarely a lie about your current state exactly. It is closer to a decision, made instantly and unconsciously, about which version of the truth is safe to release into the room. And what makes it worth pausing on is this. The fear behind those 3 words is almost never the fear of being seen as weak. That is the fear people assume. And it is close, but it is not quite accurate. The deeper fear is the fear of being seen and then left anyway. If weakness were the entire fear, you might expect that being helped successfully, having someone show up and actually make things easier, would resolve it. But often it does not. Even when help arrives and works exactly as it should, some part of you remains braced waiting for the other shoe, half expecting the person who helped this time to be gone or unavailable the next time you need them. This is because the original fear was never really about competence. It was about whether being truly known, need and all, is something a person can survive without losing the relationship that matters most. Somewhere in your history, being fully seen, exhausted, needy, overwhelmed, not okay, cost you something. Maybe it cost you someone's patience. Maybe it cost you someone's presence altogether. And so, "I'm fine" became less a statement about your internal state and more a form of insurance. A way of controlling how much of yourself you expose to the possibility of that particular loss happening again. Saying "I'm fine" keeps you legible, manageable, and safe from the specific catastrophe of being fully known, and finding out that full knowledge was more than the relationship could hold. Notice what this actually means. Every time you choose "I'm fine" over the truth, you are not protecting the relationship. You are protecting yourself from finding out, one way or another, whether the relationship was ever strong enough to hold the real you in the first place. And that question, unanswered, is exactly what keeps you drowning in private instead of finding out you might not have to. How rejection once taught you that needing is dangerous. Rejection does not always arrive as a dramatic scene. Sometimes it arrives as something far quieter and far more damaging precisely because it is so easy to overlook. A need expressed and met with impatience instead of cruelty. A vulnerability offered and answered with a subject change. A moment of asking that was technically not refused, but was handled in a way that made you feel, without anyone saying it outright, that you had made things slightly worse by asking at all. These moments rarely qualify, in memory, as rejection, but your nervous system was not grading them by how they would sound if you described them to someone else. It was grading them by how they felt in real time in your body, and quiet impatience registers as danger almost as effectively as an explicit no. Across enough of these moments, a rule forms, and the rule is rarely stated in words. It is stated in behavior. You stop testing whether people will meet your needs because each test that came back with even mild disappointment confirmed the rule further. Eventually, you stop testing altogether, not because you consciously decided people cannot be trusted with your needs, but because the accumulated data, collected silently over years, made the conclusion feel obvious and no longer worth questioning. This is important because it means your current belief that asking for help is dangerous is not really a belief about the present. It is a belief about a closed set of past evidence, treated as though it were still being updated, when in reality, you stopped collecting new data a long time ago. You are still operating on a sample size from childhood, or from one particularly damaging relationship, applied indiscriminately to every person you will ever meet for the rest of your life. That is not caution. That is a kind of statistical error your nervous system committed under duress and has simply never had the safety to correct. Follow that thought one step further. If the last real test of whether someone could hold your need happened decades ago, in a relationship that has long since ended, then everyone since has been quietly punished for a verdict they never had the chance to earn or disprove. The next question is what it would take to finally run a new test, with someone who has actually shown you repeatedly that they are not the same as the person who taught you the original rule. The difference between being strong and being alone. Somewhere along the way, strength and solitude became fused in your mind, as if they were the same quality wearing two different names. To be strong, in the framework you inherited, means to require nothing from anyone. To need something is to have failed the test of strength even momentarily. This fusion feels so natural by now that questioning it can feel almost disorienting, the way questioning gravity would feel disorienting. But it is worth questioning, because the fusion is not actually true. It is a belief that was useful once under specific conditions, and has since calcified into something you mistake for identity. Real strength, the kind that survives contact with an actual difficult life, is not the absence of need. It is the capacity to hold difficulty without being destroyed by it, and holding difficulty very often requires other people. Every person you admire for their resilience, if you look closely enough at their actual life rather than the curated version, has been held by someone at some point. The strength you are chasing by refusing to ask for help is not strength at all. It is isolation wearing strength's clothing, and isolation, unlike strength, does not make you more capable over time. It makes you more depleted, more brittle, and paradoxically less able to handle the next difficult thing that arrives, because you have spent your reserves handling every previous thing entirely alone. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who love you and still never letting any of them close enough to actually help. It is a strange, quiet devastation, because from the outside your life looks full. You have people, you have relationships, and yet you go home every night carrying the actual weight completely by yourself, because you never let any of the people in your life close enough to touch it. This is a particular kind of solitude that has nothing to do with how many people surround you, and everything to do with how much of yourself you allow them to actually reach. Hold on to this. You can be surrounded by love and still be entirely alone in your suffering, if the suffering is the one part of you that never gets shared. And the drowning does not care how many people are standing on the shore, watching you swim, believing you are fine, if none of them have ever been invited close enough to pull you out. Why you help everyone except yourself. Here is a pattern worth noticing honestly, because it reveals something the rest of this cannot reach on its own. You are probably, without much effort, one of the most helpful people in the lives of everyone around you. You notice when others are struggling before they say a word. You offer support before it is even requested. You are the person people call when things fall apart, and you show up every time competently and without complaint. And yet the same generosity you extend so freely to everyone else somehow never makes its way back to you. You would never let a friend carry what you carry alone. You would insist they let you help. But when the situation reverses, you cannot make yourself receive the same offer you would give without hesitation. This asymmetry is not hypocrisy. It is actually consistent with everything we have traced so far, because helping others does not carry the same danger that needing help carries. When you help someone else, you remain in control. You are the one giving, the one capable, the one whose worth is being demonstrated, rather than questioned. Helping others is safe precisely because it does not require you to expose the need underneath it. It lets you stay in the role that earned you love and approval in the first place, the role of the one who is fine, the one who handles things, the one who is never the problem. But there is a cost hidden inside this asymmetry that is easy to miss. Constantly giving without ever receiving does not create balance. It creates depletion, and depletion over time changes how you experience your own relationships. You start to feel invisible even while surrounded by people you are actively helping, because the part of you that needs care has never once been allowed into the exchange. You become known for your generosity and unknown for your actual internal experience, and there is a particular grief in being loved for what you give, while remaining a stranger in the part of yourself that needs to receive. There is a question hiding inside this pattern. The same compassion you offer so easily to everyone else is available to you too, if you can ever bring yourself to stand on the receiving end of it. The question that remains is what it would actually feel like, physically and emotionally, to let someone give to you the way you have always given to them. The moment you almost asked and didn't. There is a specific moment almost everyone who struggles with this can recall if they are honest with themselves. A moment where the words were right there. Your mouth had almost formed them. Someone was in front of you. Someone who might have actually said yes, who might have actually shown up, and for one fragile second the truth was closer to the surface than it usually gets. And then something pulled it back down. Maybe it was a small joke that redirected the conversation. Maybe it was a sudden, actually, never mind, it's not a big deal. Maybe it was simply silence where the sentence should have continued. That moment matters more than almost any other moment in this entire pattern, because it is proof that the need was never actually gone. It was right there, available, real, close enough to speak. What stopped you was not the absence of need. It was the presence of fear arriving half a second faster than the courage did. And fear, when it wins that race, does not just cost you the help you might have received in that specific instance. It reinforces the entire belief system one more time, teaching your nervous system, once again, that the correct response to need is retreat. If you can bring even one of these moments into focus, really sit with it, you may notice something important. The person in front of you, in that memory, did not do anything to cause the retreat. They did not flinch, did not look impatient, did not give you any actual evidence that asking would go badly. The retreat came entirely from inside you, from the old rule firing automatically, faster than any new information from the present moment could reach you in time to override it. This is the piece that matters most going into what comes next. If the retreat is happening automatically, before the present moment ever gets a chance to prove itself different from the past, then the work is not simply about finding braver words. It is about slowing the moment down enough that the present has time to actually be evaluated, rather than being overridden instantly by a reflex built for a different time in your life entirely. What silence is actually protecting you from? It is worth asking, directly and without flinching, what your silence is actually for. Not what it looks like from the outside, competence, independence, low-maintenance strength. What it is actually doing, underneath, in the architecture of your emotional survival. And the honest answer, once you are willing to look at it, is this. Your silence is protecting you from the possibility of asking and hearing nothing back. It is protecting you from finding out that the person you needed was not capable of meeting you there. It is protecting you from a specific, particular grief, the grief of reaching out and discovering, in real time, that the reach was not enough. This is a profound thing to understand about yourself because it reframes the entire pattern. You are not silent because you do not care about connection. You are silent because you care about it so much that the risk of losing it or discovering it was never as solid as you needed it to be, feels unbearable. Silence keeps the possibility alive without ever testing it. As long as you never ask, you never have to find out whether the answer would have been no. The uncertainty, painful as it is somehow more survivable than a confirmed disappointment would be. But this protection comes at an enormous price, one that is easy to underestimate because it is paid slowly, over years, rather than all at once. Every year you protect yourself from the possibility of disappointment by never asking is also a year you protect yourself from the possibility of being met. You cannot selectively close the door to rejection while leaving it open to connection. The same silence that shields you from a no also shields you from every yes you might have received from people who were actually ready and willing to show up, if only you had given them the chance to. Here is the truth to hold as we move toward the end of this. The drowning you are protecting yourself from experiencing publicly is often less painful, in the long run, than the drowning you experience privately by protecting yourself from ever finding out who would have reached for you. The weight of carrying what was never yours to carry alone. There is a specific exhaustion that comes not from having too much to do, but from believing, at the deepest level, that all of it has to be carried by you and only you. This belief rarely announces itself directly. It hides inside phrases like, "I just have to push through," or "No one else can really handle this the way I can," or "It's easier if I just do it myself." These phrases sound practical. They sound like competence. But underneath them is a much older and heavier belief that you are fundamentally alone in this, that support is not truly available to you, that the entire structure of your life rests on your shoulders because it always has, and no one is coming to help hold it up. This belief was probably true once in a specific season of your life, under specific circumstances. Maybe you really were the only one holding things together, in a family or a situation where the adults around you were not equipped to help. That kind of premature responsibility leaves a lasting imprint, because a child who has to function like an adult too early learns that reliance is a luxury other people get to have, not something available to them. And once that lesson is learned young enough, it becomes load-bearing. It becomes part of how you understand your place in every relationship you will ever have, long after the original circumstances that made it necessary have completely disappeared. The tragedy of this belief is not that it was wrong when it formed. It may have been entirely accurate for the situation it was built to survive. The tragedy is that it never received an update. You have grown, your circumstances have changed. You likely have people in your life now who are both capable and willing to help carry weight, and still the old architecture insists that no one is coming, because no one came then. You are treating your entire adult life as though it is still the emergency that shaped you, using a rule that was never designed to expire. Carry this with you. Weight that was never meant for one person to carry alone does not become lighter just because you have gotten stronger at carrying it. It becomes normalized, which is a very different thing from becoming survivable in the long term. The next question is not whether you can keep carrying it. You already know you can, for a while longer. The question is what becomes possible the moment you finally set some of it down in front of someone willing to help hold it. Learning to let someone see you struggle. There is a particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with facing external danger and everything to do with allowing yourself to be witnessed in a moment of genuine difficulty. This courage is quieter than almost any other kind because it produces no visible achievement. No one applauds the moment you finally say, "I'm struggling," instead of, "I'm fine." No one sees the internal collapse of a belief system that took decades to build, just because you let one person glimpse what you have been carrying. And yet this quiet act may be one of the most demanding things you will ever do, precisely because it requires dismantling piece by piece the entire protective structure that has kept you feeling safe for your whole life. Letting someone see you struggle does not mean transforming overnight into someone who shares everything freely and easily. That expectation would only recreate the same old dynamic, where you are performing a version of yourself for approval. This time the approval of vulnerability instead of competence. What it actually requires is something smaller and more sustainable. Choosing deliberately one person, one moment, one true sentence, and finding out what happens when you let it exist in the room instead of managing it into silence. Not the whole truth all at once. One honest fragment, offered to someone who has already shown you in smaller ways that they can be trusted with it. This will feel, the first several times, exactly like danger. Your body will respond as though something threatening is happening, because for the part of you responsible for keeping you safe, something that resembles the original threat actually is happening. This is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. It is a sign that you are doing the thing that finally has the power to update the old rule. The nervous system does not change through insight alone. It changes through new experience, repeated enough times that it becomes harder to ignore than the old evidence. This is what makes the practice worth the discomfort. Every time you let someone witness your struggle and they do not disappear, do not withdraw, do not treat your need as a burden, you are collecting new evidence, one small data point at a time, against a belief system that has gone uncontested for far too long. The old rule was built on a closed sample. It is time to reopen the study. What it means to finally say the words. There will come a moment, maybe not today, maybe not this week, but at some point, if you continue paying attention to what this has revealed, where the words will be right there again, the way they have been right there so many times before. I need help. I'm not okay. Can you stay with me? 3 or 4 words, small enough to say in a single breath, and yet carrying the entire weight of everything we have traced through this video. The child who learned silence was safer. The years of proving strength through solitude. The exhaustion your body has been reporting long before your mouth was willing to. Saying those words will not undo the years of pattern in a single instant. That is not how nervous systems work, and expecting instant transformation would only set you up for another quiet disappointment in yourself. What saying the words does is smaller, and in its own way, more powerful. It interrupts the automatic sequence just once, just this one time, and gives the present moment a chance to prove itself different from the past. It gives the person in front of you an actual opportunity to show up, rather than being convicted in advance based on evidence that belongs to someone else, from somewhere else, a long time ago. You may find, when you finally say it, that the person receives it better than you expected. You may also find moments where it does not go perfectly, where the response falls short of what you needed. Both outcomes carry information, and both are survivable in a way the anticipation made them seem not to be. The goal was never to guarantee a perfect response every time you ask. The goal is to prove to the part of you still guarding the door that asking, even when it does not go perfectly, does not annihilate you the way it once felt like it would. What you are actually doing, every time you choose the true sentence over the practiced one, is teaching yourself something no one else can teach you from the outside. You are teaching yourself that you are no longer the version of you who had no one. You have people now, or you have the capacity to find them, and the drowning you have survived so quietly for so long was never proof that you had to keep swimming alone. It was proof of how strong you had to become in the absence of the very thing you are finally, carefully learning to ask for.